Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, this show has two focuses. One is informational, and the other one's entertainment. And today we've got a pretty serious show. It's on how to deal with the severe weather. The hurricane season officially starts on January 1st, and that's because we're starting to get some warm air and warm water coming together, not only here in New England, but more importantly down the tropics. And then those storms develop and they come up here. So in some places, the authorities create a storm prep plan, and that's true here in Manchester by the Sea, Mass. And joining me to explain that plan and talk a little bit about hurricanes is Byron Pike, the local harbor master. Welcome, Byron.
Thanks for having me on, Paul.
Byron, can you tell our viewers a little bit about your boating background and your involvement in the water scene?
Oh, sure, Paul. Well, I currently serve as Manchester by the Sea Harbor Master,
Right.
and prior to that, I was the Kittery Harbor Master up in Kittery, Maine.
Yep.
Served in the Windjammer Fleet out of Rockland, Maine. Did sail training, and actually have been on boats during a couple of hurricanes.
Well, I guess it gives you the experience we need here today, right?
Not an experience you want to have.
All right. Well, with that background in mind, why don't we get right into the show?
Sounds great, Paul.
Okay. Well, Byron, you know, this area of hurricanes, a lot of permutations to it, but it's one that people hopefully can become aware of the basics for their safety. And I guess we should start off by helping reorient people in terms of what is the definition of a hurricane to begin with, right?
Absolutely. Well, the national, NOAA.
Yep, National Weather Center.
That's right,
Yep.
exactly. The hurricane folks will tell you that a hurricane is a storm with sustained winds. We're talking about a constant wind,
Right.
not a gust, that blows at 64 knots.
Yeah,
Or 74 miles an hour.
right.
So roll down your car window at 74 miles an hour without getting a ticket.
Yeah.
Stick your hand out,
Yeah,
and that's a minimal hurricane.
that's it right there. Yeah, okay. Now, so that's bad news. That's a lot of wind. But a hurricane just doesn't pop out of places. It actually
No, it
has typically has a migration or evolution. It forms in steps, right?
That's
Can you
correct.
tell us a little bit about that? How it gets from this base level, I guess it would be a small cyclone, a baby depression, if you will, and then moves up from there, right?
That's exactly right. Typically forming in the tropics, which is why we refer to them as a tropical cyclone.
Okay, right.
Counterclockwise rotation.
Yeah.
It generally starts out as a cluster of thunderstorms, and when it runs into the right atmospheric conditions, becomes a tropical depression.
Mm-hmm.
Sustained winds of 38 knots or less.
Okay.
We have storms like that fairly frequently in the winter months, that kind of wind. And then it becomes a tropical storm.
Okay.
A little bit more serious. Sustained winds are anywhere from a minimum of 39 knots up to 73 knots.
Okay. All
So
right.
that's
right.
a tropical
Yes.
storm.
That's the second.
And that's
piece.
the
Yep.
second phase of
Phase, yep.
building to a hurricane,
Yep.
which is a storm with sustained winds again
Yep.
of 64 knots or greater.
4 knots or greater. Yeah. Yeah. So that's bad news. So you get this organized circulation, usually counterclockwise,
Right.
very high winds. Yeah. So that's usually the way they evolve.
Right.
You know, they have a scale, if I understand it correctly, to kind of rank hurricanes from least powerful, which is still very powerful, Category 1, to a Category 5, right?
Right, that's correct. Again, tropical depression up to 38 knots, tropical storm up to 63 knots. Hurricane, once you get up to 64 knots, you've got a
Category
1 hurricane.
Yep.
And then at 95 it becomes a Category 2.
Okay.
110, it's Category 3. Up to 110, up to 156 knots, which is a Category 4 hurricane.
Yeah, 156 miles an hour, I think.
156, sorry, thank
Yep.
you, Paul.
Category 5.
And they can go even higher than that.
Right, yeah.
Andrew in Florida, the folks will tell you Andrew was significantly more powerful than 156 miles an hour.
That's amazing.
It really is.
Byron, when you're talking about severe weather, whereas the depression or a storm, or most in particular a hurricane, you not only get these big time winds, but you get other factors to consider like storm surge and this waves and rain, right?
Absolutely, Paul. Let's talk about storm surge
Yeah.
first. And that's really just a large volume of water pushed ahead of the storm by the storm into the shoreline that the storm is approaching.
Yeah.
And storm surge can approach 20 feet.
20 feet. So again, this T-top 7 maybe above us. So we're talking at least double that is perfectly normal in a hurricane for the storm surge.
It wouldn't be surprising. And if you have your boat tied up at a marina and the floats are suspended from pilings,
Right.
the storm surge could go above that. Now, it's tragic when you see those pictures of boats that land on top of one of those
Because they go up
pilings.
and
That's
then
right.
they come back down on top of the
That's
pile.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. It's just like scallop and bacon on a toothpick.
That's not good. The other thing there is if you got that, if it's tied into a fixed position and it can't ride up high enough, the water could keep coming up and the boat stays in the same position and you sink even before you went up, right?
That's absolutely right. When you think about you mooring a fixed object on the bottom,
Yeah.
if that block is in the mud deep enough, you might find your boat still attached below the surface.
Gonna go submarine on you.
That's right. That's right.
So the storm surge is bad. How about this whole fetch thing and impact on the waves that people might not be anticipating?
Absolutely. Well, the larger the body of water exposed to the wind, the larger the waves it built. And that body of water is called fetch.
Okay.
As the wind blows across the water, it builds bigger and bigger waves, easily 3 to 6 feet. That would be easy to reach those wave heights.
Right. And this kind of works in conjunction with that storm surge, right? So the storm surge brings the level water up over the breakwaters, over the barrier beaches, and now you've got, like you say, there's a great expanse where the waves can build and build and build, and you've got a very different situation than you would in a normal condition.
Precisely, and that's pretty much what happened with Sandy in the coast of New Jersey. And the storm surge also did a number on Wall Street down in New York City, if I remember correctly.
That wasn't good for them either.
Right. And then you add rain.
Rain, like it's raining today.
Like it's raining
But it's
today.
lightly raining today.
Lightly raining today.
So what's the
right.
difference between that and a hurricane rain?
Well, a hurricane, you could see a foot of rain.
Yeah, foot of rain. So we've got a bucket here, for example. A foot of rain would be basically from here to here. That's a lot of rain.
That's a lot of rain.
Yeah.
And when we think about tropical amounts of rain, a foot seems like a lot for here in New England, but in 2005, during the Mother's Day storm, some areas received 15 inches of rain.
Yeah. And if you don't have your scuppers clear, the bilge pumps working, your boat's going down, right?
Absolutely. That's a huge volume of rain, and some of the smaller boats don't even have freeboard inside of a foot. So,
Right. Disaster.
disaster.
Well, Brian, I've heard a number of times by knowledgeable seamen that the way to deal with severe weather and tropical storms is to plan ahead. And in some places, like Manchester by the Sea, you've taken that responsibility. You've put together a storm readiness plan, which we're going to talk a little bit about here today. Can you talk a little bit first about the goals of your plan?
Well, absolutely, Paul. First aspect is to make you, the boater, aware that there is a storm.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
If you're not aware that there's a storm coming, you can't prepare for it. So that's the first aspect of what I try to do for the boater.
Yeah.
Then the plan provides guidance, broad suggestion for all different boaters for things that you can do to protect your personal property. And then when the storm is over, are there steps that you should take if your vessel survived? Are there steps you should take if you suffered a casualty?
Right. Okay. So
With your
steps to
vessel,
take, yeah.
right? So that's basically what we're trying to do with this storm plan for the boater.
Those are the goals. How about priorities? Is your priority human life? Is that where it
Always,
starts?
Paul, you hit the nail right on the head.
Right.
When you're preparing your boat for heavy weather, you should always be thinking about your personal safety, and that means thinking of the people that you love at home, making sure that you're safe and that you get back to them. And if anyone's helping you, you need to be concerned with their safety, and also thinking about other people around you who are getting their boats ready. You don't want to do anything that may cause them harm.
Right. So that's the priority first. Injury or life-threatening situations. Then the boats after that, right?
Then boat.
Then the equipment.
Immediately after that, you think about, what do I need to do? You, the boater, need to take certain steps to ensure that your vessel is safe and will survive the storm, and that you don't have to call your insurance company when it's all over.
Right. And that's an important point, because some people think that since the local authority has proposed a plan, they may or may not follow it, or they may or may not take adequate preparations for the boat. But as you just said, insurance companies look very closely at that. And so if someone neglects making the proper preparations for a storm when they've been warned to do that, that could put them in a real fix after the storm, trying to get the insurance coverage to cover their boat, right?
Well, absolutely right. If your harbor master has a storm plan and you implement it and you suffer a casualty, you can make the argument to your insurance company, I took all the good faith steps I could take to protect my vessel, and still had catastrophic failure. Your insurance company is going to say, well, they did all they could do. We'll pay this claim. Right.
Good point. You know, one other thing I wanted to ask you about before we moved on the show was alert levels. You know, do you have, you hear about different things, Homeland Security, they got different levels of alertness. With regard to storm preparations, are there alert levels there too?
Absolutely. The storm plan we have here in Manchester has 5 alert levels.
Okay.
Now, on June 1st of each year, I send the storm plan out and tell everyone, we are at alert level 0.
Right.
There are no storms, but we are now in hurricane season.
Yes.
So pay attention to the weather. Check your marine weather forecasts. Just be vigilant.
Yep.
Alert level 1, well, you've got a tropical storm or a hurricane, and I count tropical storms as well because they can be damaging, within 1,000 miles of Manchester. So let's take the steps laid out at alert level 1, start thinking about and gathering the things that you need to prepare your boat. Alert level 3, that storm's getting closer. Or level 2, I think.
2 would be the next one. But...
So the storm is getting closer. If we're at alert level 2, it's probably predicted to strike the East Coast, where we are. And so we need to be concerned. It's not going in the Gulf, it's coming up the East Coast. The alert level 3, typically I think of Cape Hatteras, and the storm's approaching there. The storm's going to speed up. We need to think about alert level 4, which is the final stage of you preparing.
Okay, all right.
Finish everything you need to do. The storm is 24 hours away, and it's going to speed up. You may need to adjust the pace at which you're making your preparations, because it could be 18 hours instead of 24. Alert level 5, the hurricane is here. You should be home, away from your boat. You've done everything you can do. Mother Nature takes over, and then when it's done, we come down and assess how we've done.
Well, Brian, I've heard, maybe you can confirm, that the best place for a boat in a big storm is actually out of the water, on the land. So there are really 2 options a boater's faced with. They can either try to leave it in the water or take it out of the water. Let's talk about the first option, taking it out of the water, because that's the preferred option. It's a good idea to think ahead on that sort of thing, particularly when you start to think about the trailer and those aspects, right?
Absolutely right. When you launch your boat in the spring, that trailer is your platform. That is your storm plan. Your trailer is your storm plan. And if you don't make sure that trailer is in good working order, check the bearings, tire pressure, frame's in good shape, hitch is in good working order. Brakes, very important. If you don't have all those things in good order, you don't have a good plan in place.
And the time to think about that, as you say, is in the spring, because a lot of people just use it in the spring and use it in the fall, and they kind of get it back and forth, but there's no real pressure. When you get a storm breathing down on you, that's a different situation, right?
Well, absolutely. And if you're a trailerable boat, if you own a trailerable boat, you're going to be competing for room at the launch ramp. And if your launch ramp is like the one here in Manchester, there are times of the tide where you can't use it. So that reduces the amount of opportunity you have to get your boat out of the water.
So think about that timing at the ramp. Make sure the trailer's squared away. And then, so let's say you pull it out. some people may say, like in Manchester, there's a big parking lot near the ramp. You might say, oh, I'll just pull it out and put it over here. But that's not a good idea from a storm surge perspective.
I was going to say, when you think about the storm surge,
Yeah.
the parking lot behind Town Hall where our ramp is, on a spring tide, I've seen water in the parking lot just from that.
Yes.
And that's not a storm surge.
Right. So you don't want to just pull it out of the ramp and park it right there. You want to
No.
bring it to high ground.
Take it someplace high and dry.
High ground, okay. So let's say they do that. They say my trailer's in good shape. I get it out at the right tide. I bring it home to you know, a safe place, preferably someplace away from the trees that could fall on, that sort of thing. Now on an IO, which is a kind of a heavy boat, it's probably a good idea to see if you can secure the trailer and the boat to the trailer, right?
Exactly right. You can lash it down. Just take some line,
Yep.
throw it over the hull, tie
Yeah.
it to the trailer,
Yeah.
go to a cleat, make it a heavier object by making two objects one.
Right, right. So that would be an IO. Now I've heard that some people with outboards, what they'll do is they'll either back the boat maybe into their backyard and gently even let it off the trailer to reduce the windage, or sometimes I've heard that they'll put the plug in, they actually put a little water into it to give it some weight so it doesn't fly away, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Water builds up in weight quickly. I think it's 7 pounds to the gallon, so
Yeah, yeah.
you put some water in there and it will make a significant difference.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Brian, if you have a small boat, it's oftentimes obvious. You got a 19-foot Mako, a 16-foot whaler. You can throw it on a trailer and get it out of the water. That's a great method. Sometimes people with a larger boat, say a 25, 30, 35 foot, they might think, well, my boat's too big to haul, but that's not necessarily true, right?
No, absolutely not. In June, you should be contacting a local boatyard, maybe the one where you store it for the winter even,
Yeah.
about space during a storm.
Yeah.
Boatyards are happy to haul your boat during a storm.
Yes.
It's extra revenue for them, and you get to have your boat up in hopefully a more secluded, protected area,
Yes.
away from storm surge and potential damaging waves.
Right, right. So as you say, if the time to explore that is at the beginning of the season
yes.
rather than the day before the storm, because other people will have made pre-arrangements and you may not be able to get yours in the queue if you wait too long, right?
There will be a list. Get on the list early,
Yeah.
because you won't be able to the day before a
No,
storm.
last minute ad's not going to happen.
Won't happen.
Well, let's say you say, okay, I explored that for whatever reason, I want to leave it on the mooring. What are some considerations that people should think about, maybe with regard to the tackle itself?
Well, we touched on this earlier, scope. That would be the length of everything from the anchor at the bottom, your block or your anchor, all the way up to the line that's attached to the hardware on your boat. And if you're expecting a storm surge of potentially 10 to 20 feet, you need to know what your scope is.
Right.
You should know so that if necessary, you can add extra line to lengthen that scope to an appropriate length so that you don't pick up your block and drag the whole thing ashore,
Right.
or come out and find your boat dragged under.
Yeah, those would be two bad circumstances. And around here, typically we've got chain and then we've got line. It's really important to have your mooring professional check out that early in the year, right? Because if your chain, they all rust and corrode, and if they've lost a lot of their capacity, you could have chain, but it may not be strong enough to take the impact of a severe storm, right?
No, that's absolutely right. And when a mooring service professional is servicing your mooring, when he looks at your tackle, your chain, your shackles, the eye on your block, he's not thinking about, well, this looks great for right now. He's thinking about, what will this look like in October when the storms hit?
Right.
Is there enough material, is there going to be enough material left to make sure that this boat doesn't break free and go aground?
Right. So that's a good check to do early in the season.
Correct.
How about, so we've got the mooring block, if you will, down the bottom. We've got the chain, we've got the line, and that has to attach obviously to the boat. So seems to me another aspect of good planning is checking out your hardware, your cleats and your chocks and so on, to make sure they're the appropriate size and they don't have a lot of sharp edges, right?
That's absolutely right. On larger vessels, typically manufacturers put on the appropriate size hardware.
Yeah.
A lot of smaller boats, not the case, which is another good reason to take it out of the water, because inappropriate hardware could cause failure and your boat could go aground. But typically, when you think about hardware on a vessel, it'll be the appropriate size. You need to make sure that the line that's attached to the hardware is appropriate to the hardware and the vessel as well.
Well, Brian, you know, there's a lot of aspects to a plan for a tropical storm or a hurricane, and so it's really important to think ahead. If someone isn't able to be at a dock or pulled out or a mooring, they probably need to think about finding a hurricane hole, right?
Oh, absolutely right. And little local knowledge goes a long way. If you know the coastline where you live, you'll probably know of a spot where you'll be protected. You would hope at least from waves.
Yeah.
Where you could anchor your boat.
Yep.
And if you're really lucky, it might provide some protection from the wind as well.
Yes.
Storm surge you won't get away from.
Right.
So.
Right. But you know, one of the things that strikes me, we've got a lot of drawbridges around here.
Yes.
So if you're moving your boat, whether it's to a yard to have it pulled, a ramp to pull it yourself, or a hurricane hole, you want to anticipate that sometimes those bridges will lock down and not go up and down for a number of hours prior to the storm hitting. So that's, again, part of your plan, right? You might be in motion 48 hours prior to the storm, so you make sure everything's working and you can get from point A to point B.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing to remember, and this is important, you may initiate your storm plan because the storm's predicted 48 hours away, and you're in the danger zone, potentially being hit. And the storm may miss you completely. And you may feel, I've taken all these steps, and it was for naught. Well, the next time it might not be.
Well, that's true.
So you always have to take those steps. And thinking about bridge openings is really, really important.
Well, we've talked a little bit about hardware because that's an important point. And of course, lines are an important aspect of securing the boat, whether you're mooring, at anchor, at a dock. Do you have a couple pointers to share with people about the proper lines?
Right, let's go back to your vessel. What size vessel do you have? You want the appropriate size line for your vessel and for the hardware. If you can't fit the line over the hardware, the line, no matter how big it is of no use to you.
Right.
So appropriateness of size. And you'll be surprised when you go out to get your boat ready what you'll see on other boats. Something like this.
Very slender line.
Very slender line. You'll see it. You prepare by getting the appropriate line for your vessel.
Right, the size. And you really want to, the material, like I understand a lot of people like nylon because it's got some stretch to it.
Exactly.
And you really, you know, if I understand it correctly, you don't always want to do overkill on the line. In other words, you don't want to get a huge line necessarily because there's a certain amount of stretch in these, and that could actually help your boat a little bit. You don't want to undersize, but you don't necessarily want to oversize completely either because you're not going to get that elasticity that can really help prevent shocking the boat, right?
Exactly right. The appropriate size line, nylon line, as Paul just pointed out, is stretchy, and you want that, the shock absorbing. And the size of the line will react appropriately to the size of your boat. And as you pointed out, that larger line looks great, but if it won't stretch, then you get shocking, which will destroy a cleat.
That's not good news. Talking about destroying things, you get a big wind going, and something like this Dodger we've got right here really turns into a sail at that point, right?
Oh, that's absolutely right. You're not going to be on the boat. You don't need a Dodger. So take it off. Reduce the area that the wind can blow on your boat.
How about like sails and sail covers and that
sail
sort of
covers,
biminis,
anything, any hardware. If you have a spinnaker pole attached to your deck, take it off, or you can put it below. If you suffer casualty, then and the boat sinks, then that stuff is in the way. But anything to reduce the windage on the deck. Anything.
How about electronics? If you have the opportunity to take them off, you probably should, right?
Absolutely, and those are great things to take home. Just take those electronics right home. They're small, they're easy to move. No need to leave them on the boat.
Right. Now, again, you got this big wind, at least 64 knots, pushing a great volume of water. So you want to seal up the boat too, right? If you've got vents and cowlings, and a lot of boats have that for ventilation, you probably want to seal those up because otherwise you're going to get this huge wind driving a large volume of water into places you want it to go, right?
Well, absolutely right. And since you're not going to be on the boat to start the engine to try to save it, then cover all those ports. You don't need your exhaust port open for the water to backfill and get into your engine block and then lose your engine when it didn't need to be.
Right, right.
So yeah.
Right. So you're sealing everything up. You got the correct lines. You're making sure. How about a double pennant on the mooring? Is that a good idea?
A great idea. Your pennant, assuming it's the appropriate size, with all the appropriate chafe gears that comes over your bow, would hold the boat under normal and even tough conditions.
Yes.
But a hurricane is different. And to have a second pennant in case one chafes through is a great idea. I saw in Salem Harbor in 1996, we had a terrible nor'easter come through and a boat owner had gone camping, didn't pay attention to the weather. He had 3 pennants on his boat.
Yeah.
When I went out and inspected the boats on the moorings, 2 had failed completely and the 3rd had 1 strand left. 1 strand.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, but if he hadn't had that 3rd pennant on there, then it would have been gone before I ever went out to inspect it.
So double up when you can.
Absolutely.
And then the thing I keep hearing you saying is once you've done these preparations, get off the boat.
There's no reason to stay on the boat. A boat is an object. They build new ones every single day.
Right.
They don't build new U's every single day.
Right, right,
So,
right. So
get off the boat, go home, hunker down, make some hot chocolate and play a game with the kids, and you'll come through the storm just fine.
Yeah. Well, Brian, we've covered a lot of ground today about how to deal with severe weather, tropical cyclones, and hurricanes in particular. We've talked a little bit what it is and the different levels and the different aspects of preparing for it, because the key that we've talked about is planning ahead. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finalize the show here today?
Well, just remember, it's about safety first. Always. Always, always, always make sure that you're safe and have a plan. If you have a plan, you follow it appropriately, then you probably will be safe.
Yep.
And use the resources at hand. Use the storm plan. Call the harbor master.
Yep.
Use the National Weather Service to get continuous updates about the weather. Lots of tools available for you to get through a hurricane safely.
Yeah. So if someone locally here has a question, is there an email address that they could reach you at, or a web address?
harbormaster@manchester.ma.us. You can also go to the town website and click on Departments and Harbor Master. All my contact information is there. That's what I'm here for.
All ahead. Brian, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Stay dry.
Well, and thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, visit our website, www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.